Coming to you from the historic Hart Building in Marysville, California, in Studio 93, In the Tank with Fish, with your host, Bob Fischetti.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of In the Tank with Fish, and I don't have Kelly with me today, so she won't be here to harass me or my harassing her. I'm not really sure which goes on, but I have a special guest today. I'm very privileged. Someone called and let me know that Dan Ostrander, got it, Ostrander, was going to be available, and he's a presidential historian. You were a history professor for a number of years
at Butte College.
At Butte College, and so we're gonna jump right in here. I want to talk to Dan about his history in history and how it brought him to a place of meeting nine different presidents, and he has a very unique take on several of them. And I have been here grilling him before we went on the air because I had different opinions of some of the presidents and found out I might have been right.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go ahead and so Dan, how did you start into the history field to start off with? I mean, did that start when you were a kid? You just were enamored with it?
It did. I mean, I can still remember when I was in wood shop in high school. All these other kids knew what they wanted to be, and I was in the 10th grade, and God, I don't know what I want to be, and stuff like that. And so I didn't think about it, but then I took history classes. We would take 8th grade history, 10th grade history. I didn't have to study, and I got A's. And so
there's my profession.
Yeah. But the key to the whole thing is in the 10th grade history class, I had the highest grade in the class. And when I was in high school, then they graded citizenship and they graded academics. Yeah. And so the instructor calls you up and says, okay, this is your grade. And so he calls me up. He says, Dan, you got the highest grade. You have an A, but you got an F in citizenship. So I'm going to give you a B over a D. I said, I don't care, But anyway, the point is that I liked history. It came easy. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, well, I played sports and everything. So I thought, well, I'd like to go into education. I had a math teacher who talked about what a great field teaching was. You got the summers off, you got a medical program, and all this kind of stuff. And so I went to college at Contra Costa, and then I took history classes at Berkeley because I didn't want to take any from a community college because I thought it would reflect on me, but it didn't. It was stupid. And then I learned at Berkeley I needed a small school. So I came up to Chico State,
I did read in your bio that you grew up and went to high school at Richmond.
Right.
My wife went there.
She did?
And then she moved to John F. Kennedy, and you moved to, what was the school you moved to? And she knew what that school was.
Pinole, Hercules?
She moved to Pinole, and you moved somewhere from that school in Richmond.
Well, we went from Pinole. In the 5th grade, I went to Pinole, and I came back to El Sobrano number 1. But then from the 7th grade to the 12th, I was at De Anza High School.
De Anza, that was the one, yeah.
Yeah, so I went to De Anza High School.
She went to John F. Kennedy.
Okay, yeah. But, so anyway.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's okay.
If I don't throw that in, my wife's going to watch this and go, you didn't mention me.
Okay. You got to cover your butt,
I'm trying, Dan.
You did a good job.
So we got that covered.
We got that covered.
But when you went to Berkeley, you just thought it was too large of a school? You were looking for... I thought it was
too large of a school. And also, when I was in high school, I didn't take all of these college prep classes, and I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, so to speak, And so when I went to Contra Costa, I took an English class every single semester I took Bonehead 1, even though I didn't need to. Then I took Bonehead 2. Then I took English 1, English 2. And so I took a spelling and vocabulary class because my language skills weren't that great. And I had a good time in high school. I didn't want to graduate. I had so much fun playing sports and the social life. And so I remember I joined the National Guard when I was in high school in '62. And so right afterwards, I went down to Fort Ord. And I remember coming back from Fort Ord and saying to myself, what I do the next 5 years is determine what I do for the rest of my life. So I got to get my act together. I still remember exactly the spot I was at when I had that thought. And so when I went to school, I took it seriously. I studied, and I loved history. It just came natural to me. And I loved teaching. I taught at Butte, and for 38 years, and I made money outside in real estate, building apartments and property management and all that. So some of my colleagues say, "Why are you still here?" Because this is my hobby. I love it. When you get in the classroom and you're talking to students and you're connecting, that's such a great feeling.
And it is for the student. The professors I had that were excited about what they were doing. And I had a history professor that everybody told me, don't take him, he's hard. I took him over the summer because he was that good.
Yeah. Well,
so I did it.
I had students, you reminded me of this. This happened to me a number of times. Students came up to me at my class, and they told me, the counselor told me not to take your class because you're too hard, but they're glad they did. And I even had one student, I'll never forget this. It was during Christmas break, and I was in Safeway, and he came up to me in Safeway, and he says, I just wanted to tell you, I really enjoyed your class. I got a C in your class, but I learned more in your class than I'll never forget that. That was its ultimate compliment,
Yeah.
And I just loved teaching, and it was just fun putting the material together and relating to the students. And I used history as a tool to teach critical thinking. And that's what I want students to do, is to be able to evaluate what's going on in society, why and how things change, how our values develop and how they change and why they change, so that they can see these patterns and stuff like that. And so up to 2000, I taught a couple of years at Chico State in one of their programs, just one class a semester. And I remember the last day of class, I was involved in the Tooth Paradise fire. So that was my last day. But anyway, I remember telling the students, I'm going to tell you something that I don't agree with and I don't like, but I can see it coming. And that is that sooner or later, people are going to get paid just for being an American citizen. Because what are you going to do? And I don't like this. I'm not advocating this. This was in 2018. But what are you going to do with all the people who can't graduate from high school, the $10, $15, $20 hour jobs are gone? I was coming back from the Dallas airport and went and ordered a hot dog, and there's only one woman back there. And I said, I want to get a hot dog. And she pointed to the computer thing. And so I pressed in what I wanted. She cooked it and handed it to me. And another time when we were in Dallas, my wife and I went to a restaurant and we sat down, and all it was cooks in the restaurant, and they bring the plate over, but you ordered everything and the computer printed it out and you paid, But so with automation, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so
more so.
Yeah, more so. And eventually, especially with AI, so what are you going to do with all those people who can't go to college, don't have the ability to critically analyze and think, and so forth? You can't just say, well, tough, that economic gap's going to get wider and wider. So you're going to have a revolution, as that base grows. So
let them eat cake.
Yeah, let them eat cake, yeah. So what you got to do is you got to provide for them, and shortly thereafter, that guy from San Francisco who ran for president was advocating that. And I think there's a couple, I think it was down in, wasn't Sacramento, it was Stockton maybe, or one of those towns down there, that they put in a policy where everybody got a stipend, for being a citizen. You got a certain amount. And Oakland did that for a certain amount of black families, and so I just think it's possibly coming. As I said, I don't like it, but one of the things that I've learned is the environment is constantly changing, and you're not going to like the changes sometimes, but you got to adjust to them.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to adjust to them. And if you can see them coming and anticipate and kind of make your mental adjustments, you're going to survive better.
Mm-hmm.
But, the main thing is to understand your environment that you're living in, see how it's changing, and be able to adjust to it so you can maximize the potential in your life, what you want to do. what's possible in that particular environment. And
So the history was the tool
the history was the tool for that.
to move them in. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was the tool. That was my objective, and stuff like that. And so I had one of my daughters. I got 5 daughters, and one of them lives in Denver.
5 daughters.
Yeah, and
You're like my hero now. Like 5 daughters, and you're sane? What?
some people think I am.
What the?
Everybody wouldn't agree to
Is
that.
the list getting smaller?
But anyway, it just sort of reminded me. I'm kind of rambling too much now. But
Oh no, you're on track.
my one of my daughters, I was over, and she was having one of her friends over who was an elementary school teacher in the Colorado School District in Denver. And so we're talking and everything. And she told me she was the teacher. I said, "So what do you teach?" She says, "I teach critical thinking." And I about fell over. I said, "Holy, we got a bond here." But guess what? She was voted Teacher of the Year in that district.
Oh man.
And she left because of district policies and politics. And the teacher the year before her left for the same reason, who was Teacher of the Year. So 2
they're
years-
getting too smart.
Yeah. They're just no. It's just the attitude of, I guess, administrators and the liberal BS or whatever. I don't know. But she said her and I had some great conversations, and she was a great teacher. She moved to Ohio.
Oh.
But anyway,
So how did you get from Chico State and teaching, and then Butte College? You taught at Butte,
right. I taught at Shasta my first year.
Shasta.
For 1 year, just 1 year. And then I came down to Butte. I wanted to teach at Butte.
But somewhere along the line, you moved from wood shop
Yeah.
to meeting more than one U.S. president. So how did that first encounter happen, Dan?
Well, the key for me was Hofstra University back in New York. And so I never wanted to go on conferences because it took time away from my class. I never had enough time in class to cover all the material. But Nixon, as you and I talked before, I really liked him. I had a lot of respect for Nixon.
Yeah.
And
I
so-
unashamedly liked him, even though my friends were like, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah, they just didn't understand him. And so Hofstra was having a conference on President Nixon. So I got invited to that conference. And so I went back, and then they were going to do Ford the next time. So I took my tape recorder, and I went back and I interviewed all the Watergate people. Nixon wasn't at the conference, but I interviewed all the Watergate people, and I got them on tape and everything like that. And then I called up when they call for papers, because one of the things that really happens to you at Hofstra University, they have a lot of pull. And so when your conference comes up, presidents are interested in talking to you and stuff like that. And so Ford's conference, so I interviewed all these people at the Nixon conference, and I got some great information. I can elaborate on it in a few seconds, but I want to finish this point. And so then I got a hold of Ford and said I wanted to interview him and do a paper on his pardoning of Nixon. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. And it was very painful for him. And I said, "Mr. President, this is the most important decision of your presidency and what you're going to be remembered for, because it was great presidential leadership." And not a lot of people thought about that, And my friend of mine who taught political science, and he had the office next to me, hated Nixon. He left the country when Nixon became president, And so when I was writing...
Did he come back?
He did, yeah, because he was teaching at Butte College. He was at Penn State, and then he left and came back to Butte College. But here's the thing, that I let the facts take me where I got to go. And I was disappointed that Ford pardoned Nixon because I wanted to see how things would play out historically. But then, and I got into just follow the facts and everything like that. And I had Bhagwati was his name, Bhagwati Podar. Oh, he's a very sharp guy. And I used him as my sounding board for the paper. And as I said, he hated Nixon. By the time I finished the paper and we talked, he agreed that Ford made the right decision.
Yeah. That's good.
And so anyway, I felt really good about that. Well, Ford liked the paper so much, he put it in the library, and he said he would do another project with me. So I knew one of his pet topics was the War Powers Resolution. So I said, why don't you come up to Butte College, and I'd like to put on a conference for teachers in Northern California and have you talk to them about the War Powers Resolution. And then you could talk at Chico State at night to the general public. So he agreed. So anyway, I told the college I got President Ford coming, and his normal speaking fee is $15,000. Well, they wouldn't pay it. So I told Ford, I'll pay it. And he says, I'll give you a break. I won't charge you $5. But then I got my $5,000 back because Ford said, I'll hold a dinner for you. So we charged $100 a head and limited it to 100 people. And I got the $5,000 back there, and we used the rest of the expenses for the function, and everything like that to cover Ford's expenses, hotel room, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then the rest of the money, anything left, went to the student scholarship fund at Butte College. And then John Cassidy, who was the manager of Great Western Bank, also served as a sponsor. His bank did. And so you'll see one of the pictures where John and I are sitting at the table with Ford during the conference. And
so wait a minute. You've known John Cassidy a long time.
He lived with me when he was going to Butte College.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't help you. John's going to watch this. He's gonna watch. That's really interesting. I didn't realize that. But you keep finding out these connections. That's why I asked, how did you even in the first place end up there?
Yeah. Well,
and then now you actually got the first president that you met helping you.
Well, yeah. And then one of the things is that Ford, when we did the book with Ford, and then I'm not sure if it's the cart before the horse here, but anyway, when I did the book with Ford, I was at a Nixon conference, and I showed the book to Brent Scowcroft because he's in the book, and I asked him for his autograph. He says, I got this book, and I wrote the foreword to that book showing that the War Powers Resolution was unconstitutional, and I had Supreme Court cases from the late 1700s and early 1800s, and laid all that out. And Brent Scowcroft said, this is a great book, and he loved it. And so that started a relationship. He was George Sr.'s best friend. Oh. He was in the Ford administration. He was in Sr.'s administration. And so I ended up seeing him in several conferences through the Nixon Library, and also through Bush Sr.'s library. We sat together. In fact, I went to China with Bush, and Brent Scowcroft and I were together, and so the guy was brilliant. I just really loved the guy. And so anyway, he gave me a recommendation to Senior. And so one led to another. And then Ford, Bush called Ford up to find out about me, and Ford gave me a recommendation for Senior, and so you kind of triggered a thought there that I had the presidents referring me to the next president. See, so it worked out. It worked out really well, and so I feel very fortunate. But the key thing is I'm like an historian. Even though I'm a Republican, I'm an historian first. So I don't put ideology, or I don't try to put my own fingerprints on something. As I said, I let the facts take me where I go, and I try to interpret things the best that I can. And I think the presidents really appreciated that, you see. And so
by writing the book about Ford, is that how you ended up meeting Nixon?
Actually, no. How I ended up meeting Nixon was on my lectures, what I try to do is draw historical parallels about things so students learn stuff about it. I didn't want to talk about this administration, that administration, the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and all that kind of stuff. So I created concepts and I created an essay question. So what I did was the students had my lecture notes. I typed up my lecture notes. They got the lecture notes, and there were like 21 essay questions in the class. So I'm teaching them how to write and dissect them. Mm-hmm. So the essay question is up here, and then and then I would lecture, and I'd have concept 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you answer all 4 concepts and ABC under them, you've answered that essay question. So I said, what you got to do as a student when you're taking an essay test, the first thing you got to do is dissect the essay and answer it in its component parts. So that's what I'm teaching for every midterm, the 21 essays. And so
I'm not taking your class.
So, anyway, but the point is no, they learned how to write, they learned how to think.
Yeah.
And that's my job, you see, not to indoctrinate them with some other stuff, but just to teach them how to write and how to think. And so what I did with Nixon, I used Watergate as one of my lectures, but the key point was discuss realistic idealism versus political idealism. That was the topic. And then the example was Watergate. And I used Nixon as an example. And Nixon was what I believe to be a realistic idealist. And so I talked about how the Watergate system problem developed, how it happened, how Watergate was necessary because it brought the system down. I have, let's see, I think I have it here. If I can show you a chart, or maybe I can do it with my hands. I would draw this on the board. I don't know if you can see that or not.
I can't know if they can pick it up or he can, plug it in later.
Okay. Anyway, this is the way, can you see my hand? Okay. Mm-hmm. This is the way society is supposed to operate. Okay. Starting with Johnson and Kennedy, the dirty tricks. The realistic idealism is political morality. You do whatever it takes to win. And you, as a politician, you deny that you're doing that. Nancy Pelosi was great at this. And then you claim that you're personal morality, political idealism. So you're always pointing the finger at the other party that they're the realistic idealist, they're the politically immoral, and you're personally moral. This is the way society is supposed to operate. This is the way it was operating because of Kennedy and Johnson. And the Nixon people came in and continued the dirty tricks. And so the country was getting further and further away from the basic foundations and principles of how the country was supposed to operate. So in my paper, I pointed out Watergate was a necessity because it brought things back down to here. And so we got back down to the plain level. And I didn't make Nixon out to be a bad guy, but I told that Nixon was a realistic idealist, and he felt that using political pragmatism for personal reasons was immoral. He felt that. But that's what he did in Watergate. He didn't authorize Watergate, but he got caught up in the system of trying to protect, and fighting in the political battles. Mm-hmm. He got caught up into it and sucked into. And he didn't authorize it, but he tried to protect his presidency. And so he admitted that was correct, and that Watergate was, and I said Watergate was what the country needed. Things got readjusted back down to ground level. Nixon had to resign. Ford came in, was president. There was a smooth transition. The Constitution worked perfectly, was the essence of the paper. And so when Nixon used to like to hold court in New York every year after he got out of the White House. So I got invited by the Republican Congressional Committee to go back to one of these court things. He called it holding court. It's actually in a hotel in downtown Manhattan. So I got invited to that. So I called up and I said, I'm bringing my lecture on Watergate, and I'd like you to evaluate it.
Oh.
And so he said, okay. So when I went back there, I gave Nixon my lecture on Watergate. And there's a picture here with me explaining to Nixon my lecture on Watergate. And Nixon really appreciated it. And what happened, you know, he never told me that he loved the paper or hated the paper directly. But the next thing I knew, I got invited to Pat Nixon's funeral, and there was only 225 people in that invited to that funeral. And then we're standing in this hall, and you can look right out the door to see where Pat was going to be buried. And Nixon comes walking in, and I'm standing next to Pete Wilson, who was governor. And his whole political career started with Pat Nixon as he was a bodyguard. And so he and I are talking. And so we're standing off to the side. Nixon walks in. There's a group of people in the center, and he walks over in front of those people. And he looks right at me, and he says, some of you are new friends, and some of you are old friends. And he looks at the center of the room. I'll never forget that, you know. I got invited to everything that Nixon did from then on. I got on the President's Council of Nixon's library, and I learned so much from him. You know, he was just getting emotional thinking about it, you know. But
well, you actually mentioned that Bill Clinton sought out Nixon
he did.
for advice. And I don't think we realize that, Dan, that the presidents, you know, somehow we think they're in opposition, right?
Right.
But they're not always in opposition. And they look to a guy that's been there and done that for help. And you said that happened with Bill Clinton.
That happened with Bill Clinton. And if you're smart as a president, that's what you do. There's a valuable resource there, and you want to click into that. And Clinton was really smart, and he used to call Nixon a couple of times a month, rather, and pick his brain about different issues and how to make this decision or that decision and so forth. And then something Nixon really appreciated is that Clinton sent him on a diplomatic mission to Russia. Because Nixon, after Watergate, felt like he was sort of shut out of the process, and he wanted to make a contribution. And so Clinton gave him that link.
That trip.
And gave him that trip. And Bill Clinton was the last one to talk to Nixon alive.
Wow.
And so when he was with him when he died. And so I called up the library. I might have mentioned this in the Chico State thing, but anyway, I called up in the Nixon library to check on him, see how he was doing, because I knew he was in the hospital and having problems with his phlebitis. And they said, that's funny. He says, as soon as you called, your name popped up on our computer. She said, we're printing out invitations to his funeral, and your name came up just as you called. And said, she told me the president is dying. Clinton is with him right now.
Wow.
And Clinton's going to give the eulogy. So I was at a dinner with Bill Clinton. The Clintons and the Bushes are really close.
Now I've heard that before, that they're actually.
You know what the Bush's nickname is for Clinton? A brother from another mother. That's how close they are.
That's good.
And so no,
it's good to hear that.
Yeah, no.
That we always hear the opposition campaigning, like you were kind of talking about, kind of getting off track, right? And so we're going to take a break. Okay. But when we come back, one of the things I want to cover is, so I'm watching how you develop the stories, but I really want to get into your relationship with Jimmy and Rosalind Carter.
Okay, yeah, I got a lot of stuff.
Because you've had a personal relationship with them for a number of years.
35.
So I do want to cover the other presidents and your 3 books. We talked about one. You got one that's coming out. So we're going to do that when we get back. But I don't want to miss your relationship with Jimmy Carter. I think he was misunderstood as well.
Oh, no, he was. He really was. And he was a great man.
So we're going to be right back. I hope you guys are appreciating this as much as I am. Usually you guys are used to me talking a bunch. I'm listening. See, Fish does have ears. I'm just saying, I have ears and I listen. We're going to be back with Dan in just a few minutes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the things that connected him to the presidents and the books he wrote from them. And we'll tell you how you can get these books. But there's one coming out that I believe, Dan, you said in a week or so.
Well, they're going to start advertising it in a week. Amazon is. They're going to start promoting it. I just got the final book cover yesterday. And so then they were going to take it to their staff and start doing the promotion. So I would think it would be within a week or 2 weeks.
So we're going to tell you how to get 2 of them, and the third one will be right around the corner. Anyway, stay with us. We'll be right back. 93Q Radio was an opportunity for what's called an LPFM to give the community a voice.
The big part of what's happening here is it's us. It's the community of us.
The work that Mr. Fischetti has done with us to promote public education has been absolutely groundbreaking.
They have the pulse of our community, from the nonprofits to the local governments. If you want to find out what's happening in our community, get on board with 93Q.
And 93Q does so much to help our community, helps us promote our local events, as well as local businesses, and tell our story about what we do here in Yuba Sutter.
The folks that work here, they're part of our community, so they understand our needs, and that's important.
Local radio is so important. During times of emergency, they're there. We lean on them to provide information to our public.
My wife and I are glad to support 93Q. We're going to do it on a monthly basis, but I really recommend that if you want to make your community better, it's a great place to take a first step right here.
So if you can, reach deep into your pocket and give to 93Q.
93Q is a great partner for law enforcement, and they're a great partner for the Yuba Sutter area.
We're really asking people if you can give $10, $15, $20 a month, and then that enables us to continue to put small business spots on the air, nonprofits, organizations that are they're using every dollar they got just to operate, and they don't have extra money to spend on really promoting their cause. And that is why community radio, to me, I'm grateful to be part of it, and that's why it's important. All right, we're back, and I'm with Dan Ostrander and Ostrander. Am I going to get that right?
You got it right.
Okay, Ostrander. And boy, if you heard the first part of this, you probably can't wait for the second part. We're going to do a couple of things. Still going to talk about the presidents that he has known. I've asked him to do a personal favor for me, and he has agreed to do it, which is that I want to bring validity to the fact that I always felt like Nixon was more trying to help them and cover it up than he was the guy that instituted Watergate, and Dan's going to talk about how that came about and how he kept it from history being changed. And then before we get out of here, I'm going to make sure the 2 books that are available that we let you know how to get those books, because you're going to want to read this. We only get a snapshot here with Dan, but that way you can read it. So let's jump back into the deal with Nixon and how that happened, that you ended up writing the paper on that.
Well, when I wrote about Watergate, and I told you that also I interviewed everybody in Watergate, and Colson's the one that actually turned me on to the dirty tricks and things coming back. I mean, my conversation with him led me to that kind of thinking. He didn't come up with the terms, but I put it into a term that I can convey it to my students. But also, Jeb Magruder I interviewed him, and I interviewed him and taped him at Hofstra, and I asked him, did Nixon know about the break-in? And he said, no, he didn't know anything about it. So then when I'm writing the paper for Ford, and I got it all polished up and ready to go, I called up Magruder again at his house, because I had his cell phone and so forth, and I asked him, I said, I'm just confirming that you told me, and I said, I'm taping this. And I says, I just want to confirm that you said that Nixon knew nothing about the Watergate break-in. And he says, that's correct. Okay, so that's
twice.
It's twice. I had him on tape twice saying that. Okay, so then years later, after Haldeman and all the guys had died, Nixon had died and everything like that, the Nixon Library, I can't remember how I found out, but anyway, maybe it was on news or something, that Jeb Magruder was claiming that Nixon authorized the Watergate break-in. Wow. And so that really ticked me off, and so I had the 2 tapes. So I called up the Nixon Library, and I said, I got him on tape twice. Directly asked him, did Nixon know anything about it? And he said, no. So they said, can you send us those tapes? I said, sure. So I sent the tapes down there, and they played them. The Nixon Library still has the tapes. They played the tapes from Magruder. Never heard another word about it. Because that could have changed history. And it would have made Nixon this crook, which he wasn't. He did make a mistake. Nixon always felt he never got a fair shake from the press.
Yeah, I believe that. I do.
No, I do. And just like that famous speech, you're not going to have Nixon to kick around anymore. Mm-hmm. When I interviewed George Sr. For the book, he told me, I'll read my lips, no new taxes, how he couldn't get a break from the media. The economy was recovering. It was slow, but it was recovering. And they kept saying, it's the economy, stupid, so forth. And then I was in Houston with him when he was running when he got his second nomination. And he talked about how, he never got a break from the press and everything like that. The last day of the convention, the news media all had T-shirts on and said on the back, "It's all our fault." They were all wearing the same T-shirt. It's all our fault.
I wish they'd do that today.
Yeah. Well, they were mocking Bush because and stuff. And then another thing that happened there with the media and so forth is I was sitting in the press box when he was giving his acceptance speech. I was actually sitting with CNN, and I'm probably 20 feet away from him. He's right there, and I'm right here. And he cracks a joke, and the joke is something about Clinton inhaling. And everybody out there laughed. I just burst out laughing. It was so funny. I couldn't help it. I just burst out laughing. And I realized in the press box, I'm the only one laughing. And everybody out there was laughing. And I'll never forget the thought I had. I wonder if this was, if the parties were reversed and a Democrat made a joke like that, how would the press have responded? Would they have all laughed? Because it was funny. And I said, I was kind of embarrassed that I laughed because I was the only one in the whole press box laughing, and I didn't catch it till after I looked around and saw that, But it just the media didn't give him or Nixon a fair shake, and they don't give a lot of people a fair shake, and so anyway, but Nixon was really a bright guy. He felt he was always abused by the press, felt he never got a fair shake. And one of his press conferences, I think I mentioned this already, he said, you're not going to have Nixon to kick around anymore. He wasn't going to run for office anymore, and that he did. But he was a bright guy. He was a person who had moral character. People never attribute that to him. Mm-hmm. But loyalty was very important to him. And that's how I got to get close to him, is because he saw me as being loyal because of the things I said about Watergate, and I gave an accurate historical interpretation of the Watergate break-in and trials and his role and all this kind of stuff, and he really appreciated that. And you think that might have turned him off, me talking about Watergate.
Yeah,
But it didn't. He appreciated the fact that I gave him a fair shake. And so I always appreciated that. And no, he was just a tremendously intelligent individual who I considered a real privilege to know and I learned a lot from. I used his material in my history class for the next 20 years on foreign policy. He had 3 levels of foreign policy, critical, vital, and peripheral. And so when an incident happened, you put it in one of those 3 categories. Each one of those categories had responses. And critical, or vital rather, you go to war for. Critical, you try to negotiate. Critical couldn't turn into a vital, And peripheral is something like happens in Haiti. Do you want to go to war in Haiti? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I used to have part of my final exam to the students. It was a take-home essay. And the students would have to pick a foreign policy issue. They'd have to label it one of those 3 areas, and they'd have to analyze that foreign policy issue and what the solution, how they would approach it using Nixon's stuff. They were graded on not their answer, but how they constructed their answer. Did they use all the tools that I talked about that I got from Nixon and analyzing
That's cool.
that foreign policy issue. So what I wanted them to be able to do is anytime a foreign policy issue came up in the future, they would pull out the Nixon methodology, they would analyze it, and they would be able to get a possible solution that they themselves came up with using his thinking process. So, I mean, he was just brilliant, you know, and that's why Clinton called him all the time.
Yeah.
And Clinton was brilliant. He had a photographic memory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, I remember we were talking about it one time, and his speechwriter was writing a speech, and he wanted something about the King James version. I'm not familiar with that, but, you know, you want the old interpretation of the new. He had it right off the top of his head, you know?
Yeah, because there's an old King James and a new King James where they took the these and thous and a few other things.
Yeah,
That's funny.
So Clinton, well, you want the new or you want the old? And then the first time I met Clinton was at Pat Nixon's funeral.
Oh.
And then the next time I met him was at a Nixon conference, and he remembered me. Whenever I went to see him, what I did was I always collect presidential documents and signatures, and so I wanted to talk to Clinton. So I positioned myself by where he was going to enter and where he's going to exit was what I thought, because I had enough experience to kind of figure this stuff out. My friends sat right up in the front table where they could, you know, be close to him. So when he came back, he walked right by me, and I started up a conversation with him. And I was trying to think of something smart to say, intelligent, so I did make a out of myself, you know, because I had something I wanted him to sign. And this, so we talked, but he remembered me from Nixon's, Pat Nixon's funeral. So then, after we talked, he walked away and he went around the corner. And I realized I forgot to ask him to sign my book. So I go, Mr. President, I kind of yelled out. And most presidents are gone, you know, they're out of sight, out of mind. I'm a nobody. He sticks his head back around the corner and says, yes. So I forgot to ask you to sign my book. Well, which book is it? And he walked back over to me. Oh, sure, I'll sign that. See, I mean,
awesome.
He was a people person. He really liked people.
Yeah, I think you could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think I mentioned it earlier at one of the dinners that he was at with, you know, George W.'s library. I was seated at his table. And the dinner started at 6:30. At 8 o'clock, he got up and said he's going to say goodnight to the president because they have an apartment there at the library. So we thought he's gone. So he comes back, and I'm with a friend, and he sits there and talks to us for till after 10 o'clock. He was going to Hawaii that night, supposedly. He missed his flight to Hawaii, and he was staying at a hotel. It just happened to be in Kona, where my daughter worked at Four Seasons. And so she confirmed that he was late, you know, and Hillary was back in the apartment. But we talked about everything. We talked about this for 3.5 hours. We talked about politics. We talked about his boyhood. He stamped his fist on the table. It was actually the left hand, and said if he hadn't been president, he'd have killed Trump, you know. He got really emotional about
passionate.
Trump. Yeah, he got really passionate, you know, and so forth. He told stories about Trump and about himself, his boyhood, all that kind of, just fascinating. My friend walked out and said, that was the most incredible moment of my life. I said, how about when your kids were born or when you got married? You know?
No, a couple hours of Bill Clinton washed that right out.
It
right?
did.
You know? You were going to compare Nixon and Carter.
Right.
Based on what you have been saying about the different ways that they viewed and led the country.
Carter, as I said, was political idealism, you know, personal idealism. He believed you always had to do the right thing. And Carter wouldn't tell a lie. He would, you know, if Carter told you something, he honestly believed it. You know, and he was a man of great character, and I respected for that. I didn't always agree with him, and we had some arguments, but I always had Rosalind in my corner. She was great. I love that lady. And
she didn't always agree with him.
No, she didn't. In fact, you know, they
Rosalind seemed like a tough gal. She seemed she was not thin-skinned.
No, she wasn't, and she was smart. And in fact, this leads me to another story. It tells you about something about Carter's personality, because it's if you don't do it Carter's way, you know, it's Carter's way or the highway. Okay.
Okay.
So at one of the meetings we had, where they kind of held a town hall, I was sitting with Rosalind and the president, and he got up, got in the chair, and gave a little spiel. And Rosalind said, "Well, I got to go up there next. I don't know what to say." I said, "Well, you've been in the hospital. You know, you came close to dying. Tell them how you're doing." And I said, "You love butterflies. So tell them about your butterflies." So she gets up there, and she sits next to the president. She starts doing that, and Carter says, "Okay, Rosalind, it's time to go." And he kind of gets half up out of his chair, and she just keeps talking. So then a little more time goes by, and she was having a good time, you know? And so then a little bit more time goes by. He says, "Okay, Rosalind, time to go," you know? And he pops up again. She just keeps talking. Third time, he gets up and walks out of the room while she's talking. He was ready to go. So, "Okay, Rosalind, it's time to go." I said, "It's time to go. Let's go." She, no way, you know. Well, like she told me one time that they got in some serious fights, and he was slept in separate bedrooms over books. They would never write another book together, you know, because they'd get over interpretations of this. And I was in a conversation with him one time at dinner, and they were talking about going fishing at, God, I'm trying to think of his name. He owned cattle ranches and all this kind of stuff, and famous investor. It'll come to me. I'm having a senior moment. I'm sorry. But anyway.
I have those.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, she was telling me it was during this year and all this kind of stuff. Carter, no, you're wrong, Rosalind. It's this year. You know, they're getting this debate over what year that they went to this ranch in Wyoming. So anyway, but she was really a great lady. I really loved her, and she's very intelligent. And when I went to Carter's conference at Hofstra University, one of the people who was in Carter's administration told me that she was the smartest person in the room. She sat in all the cabinet meetings next to the president, you know, and stuff. And so she was pretty smart. But anyway, Carter, personal morality, he would always tell the truth. He always did the right thing. And this kind of shows you how key Hofstra is. One of my lectures that I gave at Butte College was talking about Andrew Jackson. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to tie it in with contemporary stuff. So Andrew Jackson was the founder of the Democratic Party, man of the people, first person that didn't come from an aristocratic family. And I compared him to Jimmy Carter. And I had this historical parallel, and I found a number of parallels between Carter and Andrew Jackson. And I even had a quote that Jackson gave that Carter almost used the exact same quote word for word. And so I wanted to find out if I was on target or not. It took me 7 years to get an interview with Carter on that. But guess when I got it? When his conference on Hofstra University came up.
No.
Yeah, that's what started my whole relationship with Carter. So I got invited back. I wanted to interview him for the Hofstra conference and find out about my my lecture. And I wrote a paper on personal morality, you know, and his foreign policy decisions and domestic decisions were all based upon morality, you know, and so you always had to do the right thing for the right reason. So anyway, I get back there, and I found out I was wet behind the ears. Truman was his hero.
Wasn't Jackson at all.
It wasn't Jackson at all. And he found it interesting, but I spent a whole day with him. He was lecturing at Emory University, went to a couple of the classes. So that started my relationship with Carter. We hit it off. And then I got invited. He used to go snow skiing every year. He snow skied up until his 80s. Wow. For 20 years, I went snow skiing with he and Rosalind and Crested Butte and then in Utah. And, you know, he had this winter weekend thing. And so I put together historical documents for Carter to auction off at the winter weekend. And then the money went to the Carter Center.
Oh.
And so they would raise millions of dollars. I probably raised somewhere between $4 million, you know, $3.5 to $4 million for Carter over the 30 years. And my most prized item was I got Nixon to sign a picture of he and Elvis together. And that picture is the most requested picture out of the National Archives, more than the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, what I found out. But anyway, I had that picture, and I got Nixon to sign. Then I had an Elvis 45. And so I framed them together and donated it and so forth. And guess how much it went for? Take a wild guess, I guess.
100,000.
400,000.
Oh my gosh.
400,000. I couldn't believe it. 400,000. That's the highest any item that I had ever put together went for, you know. And so, but, you know, Carter was just, you know, what you saw is what you got, and that's what I appreciated about him, you know.
Did you think it was odd, Dan, that of all the presidents you met, the one that you kept a long-term relationship with would basically be politically on the other side of the aisle?
No, I evaluate presidents by their personal character and, you know, and then what kind of job they do as president. I think Carter did a lot better job as president than people want to give him credit for.
I believe that.
And there were things that happened beyond that were set up in the international scene before he became president that made, you know, that had a ripple effect, you know, and so forth. And in fact, one of the things that people don't realize in the book that I just did on the financial crisis is there were 10 legislative laws that were passed between 1975 and 2007 that created the foundation for the financial crisis.
Oh.
Congress was trying to legislate and force the banks into lending to people who couldn't afford a loan because they wanted to, you know, make sure everybody had a chance to get a home. I go through each piece of legislation, analyze it, show how it contributed, and it was just a sliding slope all the way down the hill.
No, that's in the new book.
That's in the new book. Yeah, it took me 7 years to write that book.
Wow.
But anyway, I forgot how I got off on that point. But anyway, yeah, Carter were just, I guess I just sort of evaluate by the people that they are and the kind of person they are and so forth. I mean, like, I had a chance to meet Joe Biden one time, and I got a baseball signed by 8 presidents. He'd have been the 9th president to sign it, and I just couldn't do it. I just don't have respect for him as a president, you know, and his personal character.
Can I touch on that for just a minute?
Yeah.
Because we had conversation before here, and you made an interesting statement, and I heard you make it on your interview at Chico as well, and that is, it's respect for the office and then literally the Oval Office. Right. And you said the most current presidents, and I don't know how far back you went, you felt like that's falling off, and they are not respecting the office like it used to be respected.
They don't understand. Bush Sr. told me when I was doing the book with him and interviewing him that there's a difference between the president and the office of the presidency. And it's up to the person who's in the office of the presidency to uphold the dignity of the office of the presidency. And that is the most important thing, is that office. And it's a symbol for the country. And that person is only a temporary holder in that office, so he's got to do whatever it takes to create respect for that office. And so I think that Obama didn't get that. Obama thought it was all about him. I met him about 5 times or so. Went to his 49th birthday party, as I told you, in Chicago. And then I don't think that Donald Trump gets that. It's all about him, you know, and I'm going to vote for Trump, but, you know, and Trump did a good job as president. You know, I cannot, I like.
So you're not equating exactly the job they did. you're equating that office deserves, when you're the president, that office deserves the respect so that it will continue to hold
Correct.
that. I absolutely agree with that. Absolutely.
See, and Trump's trying to use I'm the greatest president. I've done this better than any other president. And you don't have to say that. You know, if you're doing great things, people see you're doing great things. And Trump is always pushing himself and that he's the greatest. And he was a good president. I mean, you know, the country was in great shape and everything else, and I hope he gets reelected again.
Because of that, yeah.
Because of
Good
that,
for the
because
country.
it's good for the country. But I do not think that he understands the difference between the office of the presidency and the president. And he sees that they're one and the same. He's holding the office, so it's all about him, see?
And so you felt the same way about Biden?
Yes, yeah. And I have no respect for Biden because of all the things he did with Hunter and the things we talked about earlier about the military thing in Afghanistan. I mean, no, not Afghanistan, but
Iraq.
not Iraq. No, it was Ukraine.
Oh, the Ukraine. Yeah.
Yeah, the Ukraine thing. So there's the Ukraine thing and how he basically told Ukraine he wasn't going to get foreign aid unless they fired this guy, you know, and then they go and try to impeach Trump for that. I mean, I got to say one thing about Trump. I am so amazed at the energy he has. I mean, all the shit he's taken, the court cases, the campaigning around the country, everything, the assassination attempts, and he's just that little bunny that won't quit, you know? I mean, he's just amazing.
We need to get him a bass drum. He's in.
He's in. Yeah. No, I mean, you got to give him credit for that, you know? But, you know, and I've met him twice, and he's okay as a person, you know, but I just, you know, I like Carter as a person better than Trump, you know what I mean? And I love George Bush Sr. And oh yeah, I got in trouble. I gotta apologize for this. One of the things I said about W on the Chico State interview, because last time I went to a conference at W's library in Dallas. I talked to him. He never got up on stage and talked to people like he did. At the end, he just didn't get up, say anything. He just got up and walked out. And I talked to him during the break, and he just seemed wiped out. You know, I just got the impression he was done. So I can understand, because you always got people hitting on you for autographs and pictures and doing all this stuff. So I just thought he was done. And I was just talking to the Bush people yesterday, and they saw my interview at Chico State. And she said, "You were wrong on that." He says, "He's not done." He says, "We're just giving a different emphasis." You know, and so he was really tired that day. Mm-hmm. He says, "We're giving a different emphasis. We don't want him to be the focus. We want our programs to be the focus."
Yeah.
Because once he's gone, the programs have to continue on, which makes sense. You know, and that's what's happened with the Carter Center. You know, Carter doesn't, do that. But getting back to President Carter, my wife and I bought a house in Plains so we could spend time there and so forth. We just sold it just before his 100th birthday, because he wasn't coming out of the house. And we went to, Carter asked me to head up a project for the Boys and Girls Club in Plains. So I raised $2.5 million for the Boys and Girls Club in Plains. And so then they flew us back, and my wife did the ribbon cutting for the grand opening. Then we went over to Carter's house afterwards and got a chance to talk to them and everything. And I didn't know if I would see him again or not, stuff because of that. And so anyway, I got a chance to say my goodbyes. I got a chance to tell him what I thought of him.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was really, and I left there really fulfilled, and it was like closure for me, And then that was in June. Then Rosalind's 95th birthday came up in August. And so I got invited to her birthday party. So I didn't know if I should go or not, you know. And so I went, a couple of friends. And in a way, I was sad that I went because they changed so much from June to August.
Oh.
And, you know, it was just like, they were just sort of out of it, you know. But I got a chance to say, you know, there's a lot of people there and everything like that. And she was only into butterflies at a butterfly garden and everything. And so, but she had just, both of them had just gone downhill so much in that several months that I was really sad. But then in a way I thought, well, I got to see him one more time, you know. And I would always wondered if I hadn't gone back there. And so, like, for his 100th birthday, he didn't come out of the house. The Carter Center didn't even do anything in Plains. They held a concert in Atlanta celebrating his birthday, but he wasn't there, and there was no special events. I mean, they flew planes over Plains and all this kind of stuff, you know. But he's basically done, and so anyway, we just sold the house, but I had the pleasure of going snow skiing with him, went fly fishing with him. My wife and I monitored 2 elections. Did the presidential election in Indonesia, like in 2004. And then the Myanmar election, I think was 2017 or whatever it was, the controversial one, you know, they thought the military was going to take over. And so just had a lot of great experiences, you know, with Carter. And always found him to be you know, a real gentleman, but opinionated, you know.
His way or the highway.
It's his way or the highway.
Dan, we're running out of time, and I've got a personal question I want to ask you. What I think, and because you've met all these presidents and have had the experience you've had, it would appear to me that somewhere along the line, everything we did after World War II, we were isolationists, trying to take care of this country. In World War II, we didn't really have a choice. And it would appear to me that every president since then has been global in their thinking until Trump. And for whatever reasons, he appears to be an isolationist to me, you know, that's what he'd like to do.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, I'm going to ask Dan, is that true in your thinking? Do you see that where he would rather pull us out of every place in the world and secure our borders and do that? It just appears to me he's isolationist in his thinking.
Yeah, I think I might qualify that. I think to a certain degree, you're right, he is. But also, it's make America great again. And so whatever is great for America, you know, and this is where I think where the sort of the parting of the ways come, because some people think what's great for America is that we lead the charge around the world. We're the moral leader of the world, political leaders of the world. We got to stick our nose in everybody's business. If there's a problem, we got to clean it up. Well, that's not always in our best interest.
No, it's not.
And so Trump realizes that. And so he, I think, would get involved in certain things if he felt it wasn't in the best interest of this country. But other people, it seems to me, it's like an ego thing, like with Afghanistan, you know. I remember John McCain was criticizing, you know, when they, in Afghanistan, I know it was Ukraine, I think it was, it was Ukraine, where Russia doesn't want Ukraine to come into NATO. And,
right.
And there's all kinds of economic problems in Ukraine. And so the United States came in and got involved, and John McCain went over there, and they were trying to push this. And I remember there was this guy who was a specialist in that part of the region. And he said, Russia is absolutely opposed. You're going to push this, you're going to have problems. And so anyway, that's exactly what's happened, you know.
Over Ukraine's desire to be in NATO.
In NATO, and then that's like the Cuban Missile Crisis for us.
Exactly. That's what I would think. Then that would put the opposition right at their doorstep, and they don't want that.
They don't want that, and I don't blame them.
No.
And Kennedy didn't want it, and we didn't want it, you know.
I remember that one.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was down at Fort Ord. I was told, we're going to Cuba, boys. They actually issued us live ammo.
I did sign up.
But anyway, that's I think that Trump is, you know, and anybody who criticizes MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, to me is un-American, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to be a Trump person to feel that way.
No.
You just want, the philosophy is, let's do what it takes to make America great again. And Trump has to use that as a slogan, you know, and if you don't agree with everything, you don't have to agree with everything Trump says.
No.
And to want to make America great, and everybody's going to have different opinions. So you got to respect everybody's opinions and so forth. Just like with Carter and I, we didn't agree, but I respected his and he respected mine, and you learn from each other.
Are you telling me that's possible?
Well,
civility.
Look at the brother from another mother.
Exactly. Nobody would have thought that. I love that.
Yeah, Bill Clinton beat George Sr. And, you know, and then I was back in, I went to Clinton's office one time, and I actually got to sit in his chair, and he wasn't there at the time, but his staff told me that George Sr. came there. He was in Harlem, and he came there looking for Clinton, and he sat in Clinton's chair, called him up, "Where in the hell are you? I'm here in your office. I want to see you." You know? They just had a good relationship. And Clinton went to Kenny Buckport for dinners at the Bushes, you know, and stuff like that, you know.
We're going to have you back. Are you willing to, if I can set this up? Because I feel like we barely scratched the surface, and there's certain things that, to me, I'd like the light to be shined on them. And you were there and liked the friendships. And then I would like to have a little bit more time to talk about your relationship with Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, because of the length of time. And then also some of the other connections that you made were not just presidents. There were people that you met that, for example, meeting Chuck Colson, Ronald Ehrlichman, and, you know, right? You met people that were, you know, part of what really has laid an interesting fabric of where we're at now. But you're very much, I love that you were a professor that was pointing people towards critical thinking. Don't accept everything that comes across the media.
Yeah,
unless, of course, it's me.
Yeah,
unless it's here at 93Q.
I didn't get a chance to really talk about Reagan, so we can do that next time, because David Gergen gave me a great story about Reagan that I really feel I need to share. And then I've got another great story about, I told you during the break, I think, about Carter and the nuclear attack.
We're going to do that. I'm going to have Dan come back. That's a couple of teasers for you, and we'll work that out to get him back in here. I do want to mention the availability of his books. One of them is called Read My Lips, and that is the one with George Bush Sr.
Right.
And then the other one is with Gerald Ford. And it was, tell me again that.
It's, I'm having a brain freeze here. Sorry about that.
I started to say the War College. It's
the War Powers Resolution.
War Powers Resolution.
War Powers Resolution, a constitutional crisis. It's a question.
Yeah.
So was it a constitutional crisis or not? You know, Brent Scowcroft felt it, you know, was it unconstitutional? Ford felt it was unconstitutional. Nixon did. And that's what the book is all about. And I show how it was unconstitutional.
And then the new book that's coming out is George Bush Jr.
Yes, W. And it's about the financial crisis and how he and President Obama stepped up to the plate and exercised great leadership and saved this country from the 1929 Depression.
We will talk about that, but we're going to make you buy the book first, and then there'll be a test afterwards, because the professor is going to test you on whether or not you got that. But you know, we've all lived through this. Now it's interesting to find out what our presidents did in cooperation.
Right. Obama
People think they're enemies. But Obama and Bush put it together and spared us from another 1929 crisis in America.
Yeah, and the Obamas and the Bushes get along great, too.
It's amazing. You see what you learn just by listening to In the Tank with Fish. So listen, we'll be back doing this with Dan. I'm going to get some time frame from him when I get off here, but we're going to run out of space, and I'm going to have Kurt yelling at me. So listen, thanks for listening. I hope you found this as educational but entertaining and really helping me understand some things that I've thought, but nobody's ever said that actually happened, right? And so I appreciate Dan, and we are going to have him back. Thanks for watching In the Tank with Fish.
Thanks for having me, Fish.